wanted to include this little Kierkegaard section or not on this. The reason why I included it, I think, is because I want to kind of get you to think about the idea of the public and the way that the public is constructed. What we've been looking at so far is the idea of public relations. Public relations or PR, which branched off from the more broad idea of propaganda. How do we administer propaganda? Um, Now, I'm not going to bash public relations specialists or public relations people for companies because I think those jobs are necessary. But I think the way that they are used when it starts to get intersect with politics becomes a different story. Um, so public relations takes over politics, I think, and then turns it into an extension of business. But part of what public relations is premised upon is the idea of having a public actually existing. So what is the public? And I wanted to kind of get a little bit of the classical kind of um, education into this. Most of what we learn in college right now was you're probably going to encounter tons of Marx. Um, I mean, or various forms of Marx, and that's fine. But I don't know how much Kierkegaard or other stuff you're going to encounter. So I want to present to you this quick rundown. Okay, I'm going to just read through a little bit of passages of Kierkegaard and comment a little bit. Okay, so what Kierkegaard is talking about the construction of the public. Okay, the consequence of replacing passion with reflection is a situation of leveling. Okay, or dumbing down, you might think of it as that way. But he calls it leveling. So one in which the individual is subsumed by the crowd. Okay, so this is where mass psychology comes into play, right? Um, no longer thinking of the individual rational agent or the subject of democracy. Instead, we're thinking of the crowd as this massive kind of monstrosity that's dangerous to democracy. Okay, but an abstraction called the public is created. The media contributes to the creation of this abstraction, and as a result, people see themselves not as concrete individuals motivated by important ideas and ideals, but as the proverbial cogs in the wheel. So this idea of this big abstraction called the public, right? Now think about what Kierkegaard's saying just for a second. You don't have to be a philosopher. You don't have to have taken a philosophy classes or know a lot of this stuff. Just think about what he's saying just at face value. This idea of public. Well, where is the public? What is the public? He's saying that it's an abstraction, right? It's this big abstraction, this kind of that's imposed on us that we're supposed to participate in. Like we are the masses, we are the public, right? And it subsumes us and it levels us down, and we lose our authenticity. We lose our relationship to ourselves because we're so conditioned by the media to identify with this abstract idea of the public. So he's talking about leveling is not the action of one individual, but a reflection game in the hand of an abstract power. You know what abstract means, right? It means it's just kind of like something made up. It's okay. So no period, no age, and therefore not the present one either, can halt the skepticism of leveling. For the moment it wants to halt leveling, it will once again exemplify the law. It can be halted only if the individual, in individual separateness, gains the intrepidity of religiousness. So he's talking about the only way to prevent yourself from being subsumed into this mass consciousness and to be an authentic person is to really go back to like a traditional religious mentality. I think that's kind of what he's saying. For leveling really to take place, and leveling, it means like just making everybody the same, basically, or enforcing conformism. You might think of it as dumbing down, dumbing people down a little bit. That might be another way of thinking about it. But for leveling really to take place, a phantom must first be raised, the spirit of leveling. a monstrous abstraction, an all-encompassing something that is nothing, a mirage. And this phantom is the public. There is no such thing as a public in spirited, passionate, and tumultuous times. So what is the public? I mean, one way of thinking about the public in terms of Kierkegaard, the way he's saying it is the public is just the obedient masses, right? There's the sheep, you know, or that corny word, the sheeple or whatever. But he's thinking of it just the herd, right? Uh, uh, but it also means that you're just being obedient. You're conforming, right? A sedentary, reflective age devoid of passion will produce this phantom if the press is supposed to be the only thing which, though weak itself, maintains a kind of life in this somnolence. The public is the actual master of leveling, for when there is approximate leveling, something is doing the leveling, but the public is a monstrous non-entity. It's just this made-up thing, he's saying. It's this made-up concept that's imposed upon actual people. We're all actual people together. We're not just a mass of these lower drives. He's saying that we're all people, right? We're all um, authentic and unique in our own way, but we're getting subsumed in this abstract idea of what we should be or what we're told to be. The public is not a people, not a generation, not one's age, not a congregation, not an association, not some particular persons. For all these are what they are only by being concretions. What he's saying, the public is just this abstraction. Like you get a group of people together, like a congregation, like in a church, right? Well, there you have people that are literally physically there, and maybe they know each other if it's a small town or whatever, or if it's a community. Even these big mega churches, a lot of people know each other still. It's a congregation, it's something. A generation is something, right? You can kind of think about a generation of people. There's still something concrete about it, right? He uses the weird term concretions, but he's saying the public is just this weird kind of idea that's imposed upon people, right? It's just something that kind of subsumes us and it forces us to conform. It's this weird mechanism of control almost. It shows a way that people are being controlled a little bit. It shows something that's it under it undercovers it uncovers a relationship, right? About the public and then the people who are not the public, right? Once you're the public, you're being managed, right? Together with the passionlessness and reflectiveness of the age, the abstraction, the press, for a newspaper, a periodical, is not a political concretion and is an individual only in the abstract sense, gives rise to the abstraction's phantom, the public, which is the real leveler. So the idea of the press too is kind of an abstraction. I mean, yes, there's actual newspapers, but there's this idea of the press. It becomes this abstract relationship that develops, right? And then in turn it creates the public. But, who owns the press? The press is privately owned usually, unless we have state-run media, or unless we have state-run media that um, is run by something, pretending to be not state-run, right? Um, but it creates the idea of the public. That's how it kind of created this in terms of this mass man. And that makes us like inauthentic. It makes us constructed beings. An age exhausted by a flash of enthusiasm will relax all the more readily in indolence. And even if we were to imagine that the press would become weaker and weaker for lack of events and ideas to stir the age, leveling becomes all the more a decadent urge, a sensate stimulation that excites momentarily and only makes the evil worse, the rescue more difficult, and the probability of destruction greater. I'm talking about this flash of enthusiasm, right? And indolence, right? everybody's kind of like drugged by the media, and we live a very sedentary age. We lack passion. We lack authenticity. Everybody's kind of conforming.